Recording. So this is Spud Rowsell.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello. Good evening all.
What a fella.
Yeah.
Very sad, really, isn't it?
Very sad.
I'm just going to say a few words, and it's not going to be to music. It's just the words that I think Spud would appreciate. If I could make a wish, I think I'd pass. Can't think of anything I need. No cigarettes, Spud, no cigarettes. No sleep, no light, no sound. Nothing to eat, no books to read. Well, of course, you have bought this book, I hope. Making love with you has left me peaceful, warm and tired. What more could I ask? There's nothing left to be desired. Peace came upon me, and it leaves me weak. So sleep, silent angel, go to sleep. Sometimes all I need is the air that I breathe and to love you. All I need is the air that I breathe, yes, to love you. All I need is the air that I breathe. Peace came upon me and it leaves me weak. So sleep, silent angel, go to sleep. Sometimes all I need is the air that I breathe and to love you. All I need is the air that I breathe, yes, to love you. All I need is the air that I breathe.
Yeah, no, I haven't rehearsed anything like that. Great character as well. He was a great character and a wonderful boat builder, let's face it. He changed the face of Merlin Rockets. He designed and helped design, but he always modified whatever he was doing. And he put those white gunnels on, which we all loved. And he made the boats really beautiful. Yeah. And it's been like that ever since, really. And he's always taken a great interest in the class. And he came down here with his boat every year, and I only spoke to him a few weeks back, and he said he was going to come, but I could hear Jan in the background say, "No, you're not going, Spud."
And she was right.
Yeah. And he did confide with me on the phone. He said, "I don't think I'm coming out of hospital this time." He said, the other leg's gone, and that's it, really. That was the end of it, which was, sad. At the same time, he had a hell of a life. Wonderful. We had some great holidays together.
On the RYA.
Yeah. Yeah. Barry and myself and Spud, we were going in for the 80 Olympics in a Soling, and anyway, eventually they pulled out because of some problem with Russia and Afghanistan, But
politically, I thought it was the right thing, didn't you?
Oh yeah. I did, yeah. But anyway, we took the boat out the water, and we had a leisurely drive back through France down all the B roads. We tanked the Soling up with booze, and got to Paris after a few days. Eagerly reading results in the papers as we went, because we didn't have any other means of knowing what was going on in those days.
No.
Did we? You had to get a paper, and every day they had a mistral, and the racing was blown off. And we were
Every
ever so
day.
pleased about that. We kept saying, "Oh look, they didn't get any racing.
No racing.
Today. No racing. What a shame." Yeah. We got to Paris, and we in the evening, and we thought we'd have a night in Paris. And we got nowhere to park the Soling. So
I was driving,
yeah, Barry was driving.
and we were passing the Eiffel Tower,
That's right. Yeah.
and I said, "Oh look, there's a drop in the pavement." So I drove over the pavement and looked, and went right underneath the Eiffel Tower, so that we could find the boat again.
Yeah.
We unhitched it and drove off and left the boat there. And we had a lovely night in Paris.
Yeah.
We went in the morning. We went down the Champs-Elysees, had coffee and croissant.
Yeah.
And then you said it's about time we went and collected that boat. Where do you park it? We looked, and there was the Eiffel Tower. So we drove, and it came to this pavement again, bumped over it with the car. And Al said, "Oh bloody hell, we're in trouble." And there was a policeman stood by the boat.
Yeah, all in his uniform. Yeah, looked very smart.
And Alan jumped out and he went over to the policeman and said, "Thank you so much for looking after our boat." Spud and I reversed the car up, hitched it on, and I said, "Al!" And off we went. And the policeman saluted.
It was lovely, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. And we just about made the ferry at Dieppe, didn't we?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that was another story. Because the boat was full of booze for Spud's brothers. He said, "I gotta get Brian whiskey." It was, wasn't it? I had to get Brian some whiskey, and I got to get somebody else. And we ended up with this whole of the cockpit was like this, really, you know, all full of booze. And before we set sail, we went into a local pub, didn't we?
Just for a change.
Off opposite where the docks were.
Yeah.
We went into this pub, and then we were talking about how we were going to get through the customs and all the rest of it. Didn't know what we were going to do, and that we got on the ship, and then I had to take the passports to the customs office, and the chap who was sitting next to us in the pub was the customs officer. So I came back to Spud and Barry, and I said, "Christ,
We're in the
bloke
shit."
here now. There's a customs bloke. Oh God, what am I doing?" Anyway, we get out. Where was we going? Where were we going? Dieppe. Dieppe. We got a New Haven.
Dieppe, New Haven, because I got free tickets from
Yeah.
Alex Maguire.
That's right. Yeah. We came out at New Haven, and they waved us into the
Inspection bit.
tent. You know, some covered area. Come in here. So we went in, and they asked us all sorts of questions, didn't they?
Do you have anything to declare, I think is what they said.
think
And you said, yes, 3 stolen bicycles.
And anyway, they looked all over everything, and they said, "Well, where's your papers for the boat?" And this was a brand new sailing we got, wasn't it? Brand new. And we said, "Well, we haven't got any papers," because they were with Javelin in those days. They were sponsoring us. So he said, "Ah, well, you have VAT to pay, or import duty or something on this boat. We must." So we said, "Well, Javelin have got all the papers."
Yeah, up in Sheffield.
Yeah, in Sheffield. They can let you have all this stuff, you know, send it by letter, post, or whatever they did in those days. And they never once got a ladder out and went and looked inside. They didn't ever look in there, did they?
No.
We were going, "Oh, Christ." No, they just "Oh, well, you carry on, we'll sort you, we'll got you," sort of thing.
Well, I was worried they were going to find the 3 stolen bicycles. Anyway, it was great fun.
Yeah, good fun. Now, I don't know. Spud's funeral is tomorrow at a very inconvenient time.
Friday.
Friday. Sorry.
Friday it is.
Inconvenient time, and none of us can get there really. We're all too busy here, aren't we?
Yes.
And unless I have another discard.
Easily arranged.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we should do now is to say thank you, Spud, for a great time, for great boats, for great sailing, for great racing. So, you raise your glasses.
Spud.
How about 3 cheers?
Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! If anybody else would like to say anything, by the way.
I secured a job with Spud and arrived there. He was working on his own on a Merlin 2131 at the time and started work. And there it all began, the working, where I was able to learn from them and pick up the art of the boat building. And interestingly enough, that very boat, the 2131 Merlin, Bonnie Girl, was the very last boat that they ever built upright. So the Rowsell tradition was to build boats just like you build a fishing boat or any of the ships in the upright fashion. And I managed to persuade them over the time, saying where I come from they build them all upside down and then they crane them off. You know, it doesn't matter what size the boat is, they're always built upside down. They're easy to build that way. And it was the very last one. I managed to persuade them to turn them upside down to build from there on. And we had a terrific working partnership, really. It wasn't a partnership actually, but a relationship.
That's why you left, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. But, Spud and I are very different in many ways, but it was one of those win-win situations where somehow it really worked very well. After 6 months, I was invited to stay with the family, you know, like they do with the cheap labourers they get, where they stay in a little caravan. Yeah, it wasn't like that at all. Anyway, it was a privilege for me to live with the family, and I used to be able to do babysitting things, which was really cool because I got a nice house to go in on, you know, with the girlfriend and stuff. So 68 was when I arrived. 1969, I admired his sailing career. I'd learnt to sail with my father, who was not a patch on anything that Spud had done. So Spud was like a hero for sailing from my point of view. And fortunately for me, he was looking for a crew the following year. So the first year we sailed together was at Whitstable, 1969, and we secured 3rd place in the Merlin Championships. It's the best he'd ever done, which proves how good our relationship was. From there on, we had many seconds, 2 firsts, and a couple of out of the numbers, but most of the time we were pretty competitive, and we had a fantastic time throughout the whole of the 70s. And sailing in those days is just as competitive as it was today, but it was at a different level. So whenever the 10-minute gun went, my first job was to light up 2 fags. I'd light up 2 fags as quickly as I could, give him one, I'd have one, and we'd sail around smoking and talking about how we were going to start and what we might do, and probably not so much of that stuff anyway, going around the place. And we'd always finish a cigarette before the start but during the race, if there was any chance on a run, he said, any chance for a fag now? No matter how windy it was, you know. And I said, look, I don't want to collapse the spinnaker once. I'll try. I could only do 1 cigarette like that. So he'd have to have the cigarette and I'd carry on with the crewing. But interestingly, Richard Parslow named Spud correctly, which should have been Spud, no help to the crew, Rowsell. His job was the back of the boat, mine was the front, and never the twine shall mix. So if there's a sheet loose, anything going on in mine, well, it's not his problem, is it? My drive when I sailed with him was to make his life as easy as possible. And I think it's an advice for any crew. Try and look after your helmsman the best you can, because no, really, because you will get the best results that they're capable of. And that was my drive the whole time. So everything in that boat was about making it the best ride we could possibly have together, and it seemed to work for us. So there's no reason why it won't work for other people. And I mean, I had great friendship with the families as well. So the kids were friends of mine and everything else. So I had a very, very lovely 12 years living in Exmouth, and I've got a lot to thank them for. And I want to say cheers to Spud and family for all they've done for me in my life.
Yeah.
You can have a go. Of course you can.
Scotty. Oh,
From what John just said about Merlin Rocket 2131, Bonnie Girl, that was built for my friend Don Hearn, and I can remember going down to Exmouth to pick up the boat, and there was young John finishing it off, and I wonder why it was so quick, John. Actually, it was the last boat that was built that way up. That must have explained it, because it was certainly a very quick expectant. But the thing I owe to Spud is that he was one of the first builders who was open to any designer to come along and say, "Would you build a boat for me, Spud?" And he did that willingly. And Don's next boat was in fact the first hornblower, or as he called it, hornblower, in his Devon accent, and that was a pretty good boat. And the development of that was the first boat that Pat and I sailed together. Oh, hello, Pat.
Hello.
And then he subsequently built several of my boats, and I'm really grateful to Spud for really setting me off on the Merlin Rocket design stage, and fond memories of him. And he was a really fierce competitor, especially in the strong winds, and especially with him. I don't know what you mean by Spud wouldn't help you at the front end. I'm sure your front end, John, was totally and utterly immaculate and didn't need any further help whatsoever, because the two of you were absolutely fearsome competitors, and we remember him fondly. Thank you, Spud.
My very first championships was in 1974 at Pwllheli, which Spud and John won, and I was only 11. no, perhaps it was 17, I think. Was I an accountant? Anyway.
who are you?
I was there, this sort of fresh-faced youth who'd had a week of being shouted at by Phil King, and I went to admire the boat fade away, and there I was in my clobber, and this great man actually spoke to me, and I was just chatting. I was in absolute awe of him, and I thought the boat was beautiful. It was the most fantastic bit of furniture I'd ever seen, and I rubbed my fingers under the gunwale, the decking, and I said, "Bloody hell!" I said, "It's a better finish under there than I get on the top of my deck. So how'd you do it?" and that just started, and we became over the years firm friends. I only ever crewed for him once, and that was in a yawl. But I had the cigarette job on that in those days.
Some things never change.
But we all know about his sailing, all everything. One of my fondest memories was the '83 championships at Whitstable, where I think he was sailing Blackadder with Chris Owen, from memory. That's all irrelevant to the story anyway. I'd shared a room with a guy who secured the tongs that year. And
Not Russell Bell, was it?
no, it wasn't Russ. No, it was
Normally
Protégé.
Russell.
I won't mention Roy G. Snap's name. Anyway, Roy secured the tongs with 5 conquests in successive nights of different ladies. The first night was particularly upsetting for me because it was a twin-bedded room and I was asleep in the next bed. Not for very long, guys. They don't tell you about this when you start sailing Merlin. So I slept in the bath that night. I slept in the car the next night. I slept in somebody else's bed. But anyway, the last night party is the Whitstable Champs all over. Whatever has happened, I can't remember any of the results at all. But I ended up in this family room with Spud and various other Chris, and there was about 5, and I was on the floor. And it was in a guest house in Whitstable. And you might imagine after a lot of beer and a lot of snoring, a lot of other end activity, it wasn't very palatable, the air. It was quite heavy. So Spud decided, he commented on it quite forcibly, and marched to the window, threw open the curtains, lifted up the sash window and stood there absolutely stark naked, and the poor lady at the bus stop just I don't think she ever quite recovered. So I mean, we've all got memories and stories, and he was a great pal. We went on the gentlemen's cruises when the racing had stopped, and I called them gentlemen's cruises, but he was just great fun. I think that the scariest moment I had was when we were going off the south side of Guernsey. We had a blackout, what do they call it, rainstorm. Nothing was working. Ben Jennings had just acquired a new GPS, and he was faffing around trying to get this thing working. And Spud was there on the helm, lashing rain. It was absolutely horrendous. And he said, "All I want is a bearing, Ben. All I want is a bearing." "I'm trying, Spud, I'm trying." Anyway, that's enough. I wasn't expecting to speak. I'm delighted to have done so. But he was just a great pal, a great friend, and was sorely missed by Jan, the family, and the rest of us in the wider world.
Never. Right.
Any lawyers present, Dan? Just be careful.
But no, he did build a boat for Jerry and myself, and it was a great privilege to have a boat built by him, and I really enjoyed that. And we picked it up, but Jerry and I were we suffered from impecuniosity, would I say, at a certain stage of our
Jerry's still
lives.
suffering from it.
So,
Still poor now, still poor.
so Spud built this lovely boat, and we took it away as a bare, unpainted boat, but all the lovely woodwork was done. And Jerry and I decided to paint it and fit it out, and which we did. There were a few little snags. Jerry came round to my yard, or my house at the time, and he said, "I'm not very good with the drills and so on, Dan." And I said, "Well, I'll give you a simple job. You can fix all those little straps that hold the buoyancy bags on the back." And they said, "All the fastenings, they're all laid out and so on. We shouldn't have any problem." So Jerry fixed all the buoyancy bags in, and that all looked absolutely marvellous. And then the next day I was walking around a newly painted boat that I'd been getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, put another coat on and so on. And I was just walking past it and rubbed my hand along the side. Oh! And how many screws are there? 1, 2, 3. Sticking out the top side.
What's that got to do with Spud?
Spud built the boat.
Down the skins.
And we should have had a specification sheet for the screw length.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, but when we'd done all this and all the fitting out was done, we went back to Spud's yard for I took it up to Paul Seddon's in Bristol to have it measured. And Paul said, "Oh dear, he said, the mast's too long and the boom's too short." And I said, "Well, I saw Spud, he sawed the end of the boom off on the bandsaw, which looked a bit dodgy to me, and said I'd have used a hacksaw." Anyway, it was done, he was on the phone and talking to people and sawing these bloody spars up and so on, and because I was down there at the time. Anyways, Paul said, "It's no good, Dan." Said the mast's too long, the boom's too short. So I phoned up Spud and he said, "Oh, I can't understand that at all, Dan." He said, "You better bring it all back." And so I went down to Camperdown Terrace early in the morning, and he said, "We'll be there at 8. And I was there at 8, and there was no sign of anybody. And so I'd already shortened the mast and sawn off 2.5 inches or whatever it was from the end to make it the right length, but it needed all sorts of other work doing on it. And when I didn't find anyone there, I just hung this off-cut of the mast on the doorknob and said, "Spud, looking forward to seeing you," or something. And I went off and had a cup of coffee for 3/4 an hour. When I came back, Morrison was round there, and Spud,
and they got this bit of metal, and they were there in the yard with their bloody tape measures and scratching their heads, and it was true. And there was a cock up because it was just when we went for smaller jibs and bigger mains or something. Anyway, they put it all right in the end, of course they did. But only had to drive a few extra 100 miles to get it all sorted out.
Yeah.
And it was great fun. And he was always very supportive, because when I came here first in '81, I think, I was an absolute newcomer in the fleet. And I just found everyone was so friendly, whereas I'd sailed Enterprises before and Fireballs and so on. There was a completely different atmosphere, and you know, Spud was one of the prime supporters. So thank you for the opportunity of saying he works.
I do sail a fishing boat occasionally. And Spud has built some fantastic boats. Really incredible boats. And in fact, if you look at the Red Fleet, you'll probably see that most of the front runners, apart from some that come out of Stone's boatyards, were built by Spud. He built 166 for us. It was a run of, I think, 7 or 8 boats he built. But really, the great thing with Spud is sailing. Part of he really, as a competitor on the water with all the yawl guys, he took over, which was fantastic. And I remember seeing him, I think he was in hospital on dialysis one spring. And he just built a new boat. And he came out for regatta week with Kevin as his crew, and he won. He won most races and won the week. Quite incredible. An incredible character. And so all the yawl sailors miss him, and you know, light sailors miss him enormously. So I take my hat off to him, and it's been such a pleasure knowing him as a boat builder, because I'm an able architect, and I had a few conversations with him at the time about some things that were going to happen on this yawl. They never did quite happen in the way I'd envisaged, but you know, they were really very good. So
Very
we'll
nice.
miss him. Yeah.
Well, that's right.
Can I have a look quick? I can't not say something about my old mate Spud. I first remember him at a championship I went to, Merlin Rocket Championship, of course, Falmouth, 1968. And this young guy, we were all young then, turned up. He had blonde hair and he was had this huge personality. And he was apparently, I had no idea who he was. Apparently he was a good 12 sailor, National 12. And everyone seemed to know him. And by the end of the week, even I knew him. Everybody knew him. He was like, it was just the way he was. He knew, and he was friendly, and he was a bloody good sailor. And I remember then, of course, from then on, many championships. I remember particularly Pothelli, 1970, when we had 225 boats there, and we were all floundering around in these massive winds, and there were 2 boats. I kept looking up to windward on the first leg, and there were 2 boats out in front. There was a white one and a red one. And the white one were these 2.
Oh, was it?
And the red one was John and Spud.
We had a grey one in 1970.
A real. You had a real battle, didn't you, as well?
Oh, we had a battle, yeah, but
There
they
were 2
won. They
boats.
beat us.
See,
Yeah, damn it.
Every race.
I've never forgiven them for that.
Just depends on which fishing float you go around.
Yeah.
It was one of the many things that made a big impression on me, because these guys were so much better sailors than the rest of us. The whole of the fleet were nowhere near that standard of sailing. So I thought I'd better go away and try and up the game a bit, which I never. Well, maybe I did anyway. And then when I started sailing with Keith, I bought one of his horn blowers, and we spoke about designing and stuff.
and I really wanted a boat that was built by Spud Rowsell. I mean, because those days you had to be on the waiting list for months, weeks, years. It was literally years, and I finally got there, and we built this boat. It was one of Keith's designs, and it was absolutely beautiful. And then we did that thing that we had to do in those days, which was order another one before you'd got taken delivery of that one, because you needed we had boats every year. I mean, everyone was the class was massively buoyant, and people were changing the boats all the time. So and Spud was building these beautiful boats, and we had quite a few. They were lovely, really lovely. I won't go on too much other than to say that we used to go down to Camperdown Terrace to pick them up, and it was a bit of a voyage in those days from Berkshire, so we'd end up meeting Spud and John and all the crew on Saturday, and then we'd go out and have these massive piss up. I mean, absolutely. By Sunday morning, he could have sold me anything, and he probably did. I don't know. Anyway, it was a brilliant weekend, just collecting the boat. And then he sold me a catamaran in the Caribbean as well. I don't know. He never missed a marketing opportunity. But I have to say that his book came out last week, and I'm delighted to say that I know that he saw it printed before he died. But I think popping his clogs just to flog a few more books is going a bit far. Anyway, Spud, we miss you all.
Indeed.
Yeah. Oh well. Anybody else want to say anything? Got any lovely memories? The funny boats that he designed with Phil Morrison, and he said they're never any good. He said because they haven't got a community like the Merlins have. He said with the Merlin fleet, they've got a social side, and everybody knows everybody, and it's the whole thing is totally different. And it's true actually. We know everybody, or we know nearly everybody. I don't know a lot of these newcomers. I don't know.
You will.
Can't shoot that, Barry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, who are you?
But generally speaking, it is a fascinating class, and Spud was really our leader. Let's face it, he was the ringleader. Yeah. It was a pleasure to sail against him and with him. I can tell you, sailing with Spud was an eye-opener. Yep, it was great fun, wasn't it?
I was chief fag lighter on that as well.
We had a lot of fun. Yeah. And we all miss him. And the funeral's on Friday, so we can't go to that because it's limited. There we are. That's it. Thanks for coming. And we've still got 3 bottles left.
Alan, just got